Okay then. Well, did a video recently about yet another episode within Alien of the Week, and that got me to thinking: what makes a good alien in Star Trek? And the answer is extremely complicated, but I'm going to do my best to summarize it. See, aliens in Star Trek always have a role in the story. But the role in the story isn't actually what defines what the alien is. And that is where you need to be very creative when coming up with aliens. Or not. And it's the choices of how creative you want to be that determine how the aliens come off in terms of their I guess you could say the way they're appreciated by those who see them. So I picked a few examples to look at that I think would be useful for this. Because if you look at his, uh, all items 630, I'm not entirely sure how many of the non-humanoids that includes, but let's face it, there's a lot of sentient species in Star Trek. This is just the A to G section. Actually, probably not even all of the G section. That is a lot. Many of which were seen once and never seen again. Some of them were mentioned in dialogue once and never mentioned again. The level of utilization of Star Trek aliens is exceptionally diverse because, as I mentioned earlier, the reason that an alien race was created dictates how much they get used, how they get used, and how much the audience learns about them. So, let's take a look at examples. Andorians, introduced in the original series as one of the four founding members of the Federation, almost completely ignored in the next generation. Then again, the next generation barely has Vulcans in it. Yeah, all of the founding members of the Federation get sidelined for TNG. DS9 and Voyager don't use them much either. Again, you have Vulcans. You don't see Andorians or Tellarites. And Vulcans are kind of sort of not seen very often. You see humans and a whole bunch of other guys. So, Andorians. There's that one appearance of what is apparently an Andorian makeup test in TNG, and that's literally it for all of TNG, Voyager, and DS9. But other works in Star Trek that were made later on, real time period that is, do use them. And in fact, TOS, when it was continued in the animated series had Andorians in it because the animated series didn't need to do makeup budgets. It's drawing people and having a animator draw Andorians really isn't much different than having them draw a human. You draw a human, you put antennas on their head. I mean, because seriously, this makeup here for Talis is actually very simple. She just has the antennas attached to her head. I mean, I've actually heard of people doing setups like this where it's a wig and the antennas are actually part of the wig. So that you just put the whole thing on top and boom, done. So anyway, moving on. Like the reason I'm bringing up the Andorians is that the Andorians are a race that has existed in Star Trek canon for a long period of time, but aren't actually all that important. I mean, Vulcans get brought up a lot more than Andorians do because Spock is one of the two most beloved characters in Star Trek history, and Spock is a Vulcan, or half Vulcan, anyways. So, almost everyone who has heard of Star Trek knows what Vulcans are. They're just that big of a deal. Andorians, not so much. Now, that is not to say that Andorians are um, unimportant, just, not something that's used front and center in something people think of immediately, unless they're, people who, casual fans might not even know who they are. Let's just leave it at that. Anyway, though, so let's go to other examples because I picked four, or five, for the purposes of this. And yeah, the Katati. This is going to be a quick one. See, this is a race that's alien of the week that Voyager ran into. They had been displaced from their home, wandering as um, vagrants who didn't really have any place to settle to. And oh, yeah, the handful of bits of technology that they had been able to pull together when fleeing their homeworld is starting to run out of juice and break down, and they don't actually have the ability to properly maintain their equipment because they left behind on their homeworld some of the things they needed in order to do so. So, while this race has a very interesting physical appearance, I mean, uh, they're kind of lizard like. I would actually have to question whether they're actually a humanoid species. Um, this lists them as humanoids here, but they look about as humanoid as Saurians and Gorn do. Again, lizard-like aliens that are kind of sort of human shaped. Don't have ears, don't have hair, interesting stuff. Thing is, their tragic backstory and the way they look are pretty much all we know of them because it's an alien of the week that was seen once and that was it. Now, this is one of those that was created to give the party a problem to deal with. It's like, oh, you have encountered these people who are lost in space and unsure what they want to do, blah 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 blah. Which, you know what, for a alien of the week that is there to be a problem for the crew to solve, it worked rather well in my opinion. Then the crew solves the problem and leaves. Done. Bye. Then we have these guys. Yeah. They cause problems. They don't go away. So, Cardassians introduced in TNG and have been used repeatedly since then. Very repeatedly. Yeah. The people who introduced them in TNG were intentionally introducing them as a ongoing, what's the best way to put this, political entity for Federation crews to interact with. They're not always villains. They're a political entity that the Federation isn't even at war with for TNG, anyways. They talk about the fact that Federation fought a war with them in the past, but the Federation's financially invested in maintaining a peace with the Cardassians, and quite frankly, doesn't want a war with them, and the Cardassians don't want to fight a war either. So people are doing what they can to maintain the peace. It's not like both sides are actually fully comfortable with this, mind you, because that whole Maquis thing came from the fact that several people were unhappy with the terms of the treaty that defined the Federation Cardassian border after the end of the armed conflict between the Cardassians and the Federation. That being said, that is a way of introducing a race, like, for a, like, serious long-term plan was great. That is the sort of thing that you could do in a TTRPG campaign. It's like, "Oh, hey, you encountered these guys. Oh, well, I wonder how long it'll be before you run into them again." Yeah, 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 yeah. 3 days later, "Oh, it's them again." Let's face it, Cardassians were presented in the show as a galactic power, not random losers who are homeless bums. An actual galactic power. You know, a race that controls several solar systems and has several billion people and technologically advanced starships and weaponry and yada yada yada. Is all of their tech as good as that of the Federation? Nah. Are they mean and sneaky? Yes. Yes, they are. And they have tech that you as a Federation person are not necessarily going to be able to counteract easily. Because again, they're using tech designed for reasons that the Federation doesn't necessarily develop tech. So, fun stuff. Less powerful than the Federation, but we're talking about a single alien race, whereas the Federation is a collective of like hundreds or something. I genuinely don't remember if anyone has ever said how many sentient species are actually part of the Federation. Hmm. The general feel to it, though, is probably hundreds, many of which would otherwise be minor galactic powers that control only their own home system and little, if any, else. Because, yes, the trope of sentient races that never leave their home system and barely even look at the outside universe is something that apparently applies to Federation member worlds too. Shocking. Not really. It's a writer's convenience thing. Anyway, so these guys aren't a race that stays home. These guys are a race that decided they wanted to experience the galaxy and enjoy owning it. Anyways, let's go with a race that is less expansive, but still technologically quite powerful. The Children of Tama, also known as the Temerians, and quite frankly, one of those races where it's not clear how much territory they actually control. Okay, that's actually something that TNG didn't do a good job of communicating. We do know that they come from this planet, and the Federation encounters them in TNG. Picard figures out how to talk to them, kind of, sort of. Yeah, he doesn't actually get very far, but he does at least start the process. And the Temerians are shown later on to be very friendly with the Federation because apparently the whole linguistic nonsense was the only real barrier to the Temerians and the Federation being friends. Uh, that aside, it's the linguistic thing that defines the Temerians as a race. Because, like, that's one thing I've been going over with all of these things is what makes this alien race noteworthy? What is it about them that people observing the setting need to know about them to understand who and what they are? Okay, so the Andorians. I mean, there are several things. It's like this is what they look like, blah blah blah. The main thing that defines the Andorians as a race is the fact that they're one of the founding members of the Federation. The four races that originally signed the Federation Charter, the Andorians were one of them. That's what defines them as a race. The Katati are defined by the fact that their homeworld got annihilated or assimilated or whatever, and most of them are that are okay. Most of the ones that are not assimilated are now traveling through space, like homeless bums trying to find a place to live. Cardassians are defined by the fact that they are a militaristic culture that has an intergalactic empire and is not someone where you can just threaten to shoot one or two of them and expect to be able to force them to capitulate to your will. If you try it, you might have a fleet of starships explain to you why you should stop. Anyways, the Children of Dama. What defines them is their weird language and the fact that they actually have relatively advanced technology is highly noteworthy. Because, like with the thing with the Cardassians, is that it's not like Temerian technology is just better than Federation technology. In some ways, it's apparently worse, but it's, a high enough level that you would need to do a methodical review to figure out which side is actually better. Both of them are quite capable of doing the basics of flying around, building starships, and all that stuff. Having the Temerian ship fight the Enterprise, well, that was a real fight. Which one would have won in a fight to the finish? We'll never know. But, you know, it wasn't a one sided slap fest. Also, another interesting thing with the Temerians is that people sometimes mock the fact that the guy used daggers, but the style of dagger that he uses is apparently made of a material that is actually more durable than anything we have in real life. So, yeah, this is a dagger designed by a scientifically advanced race that understands metallurgy in a way that people in real life don't, and is capable of stabbing through force fields. Yeah, that's a fun thing. And of course, this specific style of dagger was chosen by the Temerian captain because you could use it to kill that stupid energy monster. Anyways, moving on. The Edo. One of the most infamous one off races due to the bizarre nature of the story that they were part of. You have the whole thing with the Edo god, blah, 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 blah. Well, see, here's the thing the whole story with the Edo god is what defines this race. They don't look anything different than humans. If you had one of them stop wearing one of those weird outfits and put on a Starfleet uniform, suddenly it'd be just another person on the deck. Wouldn't stick out at all if wearing a Starfleet uniform. Maybe have one of these necklace things on the uniform because it's a religious relic or something, and what have you. And that would be the only outward sign that this is an Edo and not a human. Because yeah, that's a thing that happens in Star Trek many times is that you have the this alien race that's, for budget reasons, they just look like humans. They're people from this other planet over here. And what do they look like? Oh, they just look like humans. But again, this is one of those things about the function of a race in a story, and it's something that you can hand wave in certain circumstances because when you're actually doing this in a TTRPG, you don't need to necessarily explain to the players all of the exact specifics of how they look. Because you could just say that, you know what, I'm going to go with a different example, the Kess. The Kess are one of those examples where there is a very, very simple difference between them and humans that's relatively subtle. Actually, you know what? I'm thinking of the wrong race. Dang it. Anyway, these guys are also one of those where they have the little forehead ridge thing. That's what makes them look different from humans. And like with the Edo, is that the main thing that distinguishes the Edo from humans is the way they dress, but that's more cultural. What defines the Edo as a race is their culture. Notice how he didn't say much about Andorian culture or Katati culture or Cardassian culture or Children of Tama culture, because that's not what defines them. Yes, they all have one of some sort and something that's, unique to them to some degree anyways. And that's part of the thing that defines this race though is they're the children of the Edo god. And no one doubts that the Edo god is real. And that makes their culture very noteworthy. Something that people have reason to remember. Now, writing a race, y- there's a whole wide range of things you can do. And the first thing to take into consideration is, why is this race in the story? You can throw in weird random quirks. Those are fun, honestly. But you need to start by thinking about why the race is in the story. Because, telling the players this 30-minute diatribe on how the aliens of the week have three hearts when it doesn't actually matter in the story is a waste of time. Now, knowing that these aliens have three hearts is a fun detail. Just, you wouldn't want to overemphasize it, let's put it that way. Was some race in TNG that looked nearly the same as humans, but what made them different was that they had a colored streak in their hair. I thought that was the Kesp and the Prit, but it wasn't, and I don't remember exactly what it was off the top of my head. Oh well, it doesn't matter. Like I said before, defining the appearance of an alien race, especially in a TTRPG where you might actually just describe them by talking about it and not even have a picture, is very up to you. I mean, you can do something over the top weird, like the Philosians, who are plant people. Actually, you know what? I can quickly pull up a picture of the Philosians. P Here we are. Yeah, these things from the animated series. One of the things that the people who created the animated series found to be um, something that they wouldn't have been able to do in live action because it's too expensive. But it's very much a science fiction concept. Plant based sentient life forms who think they're better than everyone else. Okay, then. Have fun with that idea. And honestly, the Philosian story was one of the better ones in the animated series. It's like, it's kind of like with the Cardassians, it's that it's a race that at one point in time wanted to rule the universe and doesn't. Oh, yeah. Also, because of the fact that Kirk and his crew had a meeting with the Philosians that ended somewhat amicably and actually made things better for the Philosians. Apparently, the Philosians became friendly with the Federation and may or may not have actually have joined the Federation later. Oh, apparently we didn't actually see one in lower decks, but they did mention that you know at least one has been on a Federation ship. Because, like with the Philosians, one thing that's important to remember about them in the animated series is that most of the members of their race are dead in this mummified state where they're not gone, but they're unable to act. And, well, I mean, their physical bodies are still there, but the Philosians have concluded that all of these ancestors of theirs are dead or as good as dead. And this Caniclius guy, that plot is him actually attempting to save the Philosians because their race was dying out because their maturation cycle causes them to get larger, and the current generation of them in this shrunken state aren't actually mature adults, so their ability to produce offspring is not working right or something. Because again, it's like, oh, it's a bacteria from a different planet, and oh wait, no, it went rampant and turned into a deadly plague in this weird alien environment. Oops. Anyway, though, I think that's enough of this for now. Uh, Hope that gave you guys ideas on what you can do when adding sentient races to your games. And you know what? There's so many races already in Star Trek that if you have a specific reason for wanting to use a race, maybe there's already one that fits the bill. Of course, you could always make up your own. A lot of the ones in Star Trek play off of the idea that there are thousands of worlds in the galaxy, all of which have their own life on them. Sentient races and what have you are plentiful. So, you can have 100 different sentient species in a story. Literally, actually. That does kind of sort of come up in the Borg related stuff because, the whole like Borg species identifications numbers thing, those are in the thousands. So, and those are all presumably also numbers that the Borg gave to sentient species because it would be in the millions if it was literally every single life form the Borg had ever encountered. So, the fact that there are over 10,000 species that have been given Borg identification numbers says a lot about how many sentient races there are in Star Trek. Conceptually, anyways, even if they don't actually see all of them. But, like I said before, this category species page has 630 items in it. Have fun with that. See you guys later.